I'm Maya, 32 female. I live in a small but sunny apartment that overlooks a park, a place I chose because it felt like a world away from the cold, marble-floored mansion I grew up in. For the past 5 years, my life has been my business, a gourmet food company called Artisan's Table that I poured my heart, soul, and every cent I had into. This story is about how the people who were supposed to be my safety net not only refused to catch me when I fell, but cut the ropes and watched me plummet, all before a single act of forgotten kindness gave me the power to change everything. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Failure has a distinct taste. It's not bitter, like a bad cup of coffee, or sour, like spoiled milk. It's the taste of ash and dust, the flavor of nothingness that coats your tongue when you realize everything you've worked for has disintegrated. That was the taste in my mouth as I drove my sensible, slightly beat-up sedan towards my parents' estate. The manicured lawns and towering oak trees that lined the driveway used to feel like a fairy tale. Now, they felt like a judgment. Each perfectly trimmed hedge was a testament to a world of stability and success that I had, apparently, failed to achieve. My business, Artisan's Table, was my dream. I sourced unique, high-quality ingredients from local farmers and turned them into exquisite jams, sauces, and baked goods. For 3 years, it was a rising star in the local foodie scene. I won awards, got write-ups in magazines, and felt the exhilarating thrill of building something from scratch. But a perfect storm of a sudden supply chain disruption, a key retail partner going bankrupt, and my own naive underestimation of cash flow needs had brought it all crashing down. I was weeks away from insolvency, facing the gut-wrenching prospect of laying off my small, dedicated team and losing everything. Swallowing my pride was the hardest part. The Vance family, my family, did not tolerate failure. My father, Arthur Vance, was a real estate titan, a man who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. My mother, Isabel, curated art galleries and chaired charity galas, her life a performance of effortless elegance. And my older brother, Liam, was the golden child, a vice president at our father's company, Vance Holdings, who had never taken a wrong step in his life. I was the creative one, a label that felt like a compliment when I was succeeding, but had become a synonym for irresponsible now that I was failing. I parked my car, not in the main circular driveway, but off to the side, near the staff entrance. It felt more appropriate. Walking up the stone steps to the massive oak door, I rehearsed my speech. I wasn't asking for a handout, I told myself. I was asking for a loan, a business investment. I had a recovery plan, a solid projection for how I could stabilize and rebuild if I could just get a capital injection. I knew they could afford it. A loan of the size I needed was, to them, the equivalent of a rounding error. The door was opened by our longtime housekeeper, Maria, who gave me a warm but worried smile. "Maya, it's good to see you. There in the study." The study was my father's sanctuary. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books that were never read, and a massive mahogany desk that served as his throne. He was there, sitting behind it, looking over some documents. My mother was perched elegantly on a wingback chair, and Liam stood by the fireplace, a smug, knowing look already on his face. It felt less like a family room and more like a boardroom where my fate was to be decided. "Maya," my father said, not looking up from his papers, "to what do we owe the pleasure?" His tone was clipped, impatient. "Father, Mother, Liam," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need to talk to you about my business." I laid it all out, the challenges, the unexpected setbacks, the dire financial situation. I didn't sugarcoat it. I owned my mistakes, explaining what I had learned and how I planned to fix it. Then I got to the point. "I need a loan to get through this. I've worked out a payment plan with interest. I just need some temporary help to secure the company's future." Silence. My father finally put down his papers and steepled his fingers, looking at me over them. His eyes were cold, analytical. "Let me get this straight," he said. "You want us to throw good money after bad? You took a risk on this little project, of yours, and it didn't pan out. That's the nature of the market, Maya. It's not a little project, Dad, I countered, my voice rising slightly. It's a viable business that hit a rough patch, with your help. Our help, my mother interjected, her voice smooth as silk but sharp as glass. Darling, we helped you buy Providin. GU with an education and a name. We gave you every advantage. What you do with it is your own responsibility. We can't be seen bailing out our daughter's failed hobby. Seen, the word hung in the air. It was always about appearances. The perfect, successful family, a daughter with a failed business didn't fit the brand. Liam chimed in, leaning against the mantelpiece. Maya, be realistic. You're emotional about this, and it's clouding your judgment. Dad's right. Sometimes you have to know when to cut your losses. It's just business. This is my life, Liam, I said, turning to him. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. There are people who depend on me, employees who will lose their jobs. My father stood up, the ultimate signal that the conversation was over. My decision is final. We will not be investing in Artisan's Table. It would be a foolish and sentimental move. You're a Vance. I suggest you start acting like one. Dissolve the company, handle your debts, and perhaps Liam can find a sensible position for you at the firm. Something in marketing, perhaps. The condescension was suffocating. He wasn't just refusing to help. He was erasing my identity, trying to slot me back into the neat little box he'd designed for me. The feeling of humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I looked from my father's stony face to my mother's dismissive gaze to my brother's triumphant smirk. There was no empathy here, no family, only a board of directors who had just voted against my survival. I see, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Thank you for your time. I turned and walked out of the study, past Maria's pitying look, and out the grand oak door. As it clicked shut behind me, the sound echoed the closing of a chapter in my life. The taste of ash was back, stronger than ever. I had come to my family for a lifeline, and they had handed me an anchor. I felt utterly alone, abandoned by the very people who should have been my staunchest supporters. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of tears. I didn't know it then, but that closed door wasn't an ending. It was a prelude to a betrayal so profound it would force me to redefine my entire world. The days following my rejection were a hollowed-out version of my life. I moved through the motions in a fog of despair. The process of dismantling Artisan's Table was agonizing. Each phone call to a supplier, each conversation with a landlord, each email to a loyal customer felt like a small death. The hardest part, by far, was telling my 3 employees. Sarah, my baker, was a single mom who had become a true artist with pastries. David, my packer and delivery driver, was a college student putting himself through school. And Maria, who managed our small storefront, had the warmest smile in the city. Telling them that their jobs were gone, that my dream had failed and was taking their livelihoods with it, shattered what was left of my heart. I paid them as much severance as I could scrape together from my dwindling personal savings, but it felt like a pittance for their loyalty and hard work. My family, of course, was silent. I received no calls, no texts. It was as if my failure had made me invisible to them. I expected the distance, but the totality of the silence was a chilling confirmation of what I had suspected in that study. My worth to them was inextricably tied to my success. Now that I had failed, I was no longer a part of the Vance family portrait. I was a blemish to be ignored until I faded away. My friend, Chloe Chen, was my only lifeline. She'd call every day, letting me vent, cry, and rage. "They're unbelievable, Maya," she'd say, her voice laced with the fury I was too exhausted to sustain. "They have no idea what they've lost." About 2 weeks after that fateful meeting, the final blow landed. It didn't come in the form of a phone call or a letter, but through the glossy, curated world of social media. I was numbly scrolling through my phone one evening, trying to distract myself from the mountain of debt collection letters on my coffee table, when a picture popped up on my screen. It was posted by my mother. The photo was a sun-drenched tableau of perfection. My parents, Arthur and Isabel, stood on the deck of a massive cruise ship, their arms around each other, beaming. My brother Liam and his equally perfect wife, Jessica, were there too, raising champagne flutes to the camera. The background was a stunning vista of turquoise water and a distant, mountainous coastline. Everyone was dressed in expensive-looking resort wear, their faces glowing with health and happiness. The caption, written in my mother's breezy, elegant style, read, "Making memories on our spontaneous family getaway through the Greek Isles. So important to cherish these moments together. Family first blessed luxury travel." I stared at the picture, the phone trembling in my hand. Spontaneous family getaway. The words echoed in my head. The CR. UIs they were on was one of the most exclusive and expensive in the world. The cost of a single ticket for that 2-week trip would have been more than enough to save my company. It would have covered my debts, paid my employees, and given me the breathing room I needed to get back on my feet. They had the money. They had it right there, ready to be spent on a spontaneous vacation. But when their own daughter, their own flesh and blood, had come to them, broken and desperate, they had turned her away without a second thought. The phrase that truly twisted the knife in my gut was the hashtag, family first. It was such a grotesque, stunning piece of hypocrisy that I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips. Family first? I was their family, but I wasn't on that boat. I wasn't making memories. I was in my tiny apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of my life's work, trying to figure out how I was going to pay next month's rent. The message was crystal clear. I was not part of their family. Not the part that mattered anyway. I clicked through the pictures. There were more. Liam and my father playing shuffleboard, my mother and Jessica getting spa treatments, the 4 of them at a captain's dinner, dressed to the nines. Each photo was a fresh wave of pain, a visual confirmation of my exclusion. They were not just living their lives without me, they were celebrating, flaunting their wealth and their perfect family unit while I was drowning. It wasn't just a rejection anymore, it was a deliberate, public act of abandonment. They hadn't just closed the door. They had locked it, boarded it up, and sailed away on a sea of champagne and indifference. That night, something inside me shifted. The grief and despair that had been weighing me down began to curdle, hardening into something else. It was cold, sharp, and intensely focused. It was anger, a deep, quiet rage that settled in my bones. They had misjudged me. They saw me as the creative, emotional daughter, too soft to handle the real world. They thought I would just quietly accept my fate, dissolve into the background, and maybe, if I was lucky, be offered a pity job at the family firm. They had no idea what I was capable of. I saved the picture to my phone, the one of the 4 of them toasting, with that sickening family-first hashtag. I looked at their smiling, carefree faces, and I made a promise to myself. I would not be broken by this. I would not be erased. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I would get back on my feet. And when I did, I would build something so strong, so successful, that they would have no choice but to see me. They would regret the day they chose a luxury cruise over their own daughter. The feeling of being abandoned was absolute, but in the ashes of that abandonment, a single, resilient ember of resolve began to glow. And I would fan it into a fire. The weeks that followed were a testament to the human ability to function on autopilot. I finalized the dissolution of Artisan's Table, a process that felt like signing a death certificate over and over again. I sold off my commercial kitchen equipment for pennies on the dollar, the gleaming stainless steel that once represented so much promise, now just cold, hard metal being hauled away by strangers. I took a temporary job as a barista at a local coffee shop. The irony was not lost on me. The award-winning gourmet food entrepreneur was now steaming milk and misspelling names on paper cups for minimum wage. It was humbling, but it paid the rent, just barely. The aroma of coffee beans and burnt sugar replaced the scent of artisanal jams and freshly baked bread that used to define my days. My parents and Liam returned from their cruise, their social media feeds updated with tanned, smiling photos. They never called. I imagine they assumed I was busy with the unpleasantness, as my mother would have called it, of dismantling my failure. In their world, you didn't dwell on losses, you simply moved on to the next acquisition, the next gala, the next victory. They had moved on from me. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, while on my break at the coffee shop, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. My heart sank, assuming it was from another creditor, this one more official and threatening than the others. With a sigh of resignation, I tore it open. But the letterhead wasn't from a collection agency. It was from a law firm I'd never heard of in a small town in Vermont. The letter was formal and dense with legal jargon, but the message was simple and utterly shocking. My great-aunt, Alara Vance, had passed away a month ago. I had to read the name twice. I barely remembered her. She was my grandfather's eccentric sister, a woman who had been estranged from the main Vance family for decades. I had met her only a handful of times as a small child, and my memories were faint. A whirlwind of colorful scarves, the scent of lavender, and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. My father always referred to her as the black sheep, a woman who had turned her back on the family's wealth and expectations to live a quiet, artistic life in the mountains. But it was the next part of the letter that made me drop my half-eaten sandwich. Aunt Alara had named me as the sole beneficiary of her estate. According to the letter, this included her house in Vermont, its contents, and a portfolio of investments. The lawyer, a Mr. Abernathy, requested I contact him at my earliest convenience to discuss the details of the inheritance. I sat there, stunned, amidst the bustle of the coffee shop. It felt unreal, like a plot from a forgotten novel. A great-aunt I barely knew had left me everything. Why me? She hadn't seen me in over 20 years. She certainly didn't know about my failed business or my current desperate situation. That night I called Chloe, my voice trembling as I read her the letter. "This can't be real," I kept saying. "It has to be a mistake." "There's only one way to find out, Maya," Chloe said, her voice filled with a cautious excitement I didn't dare feel yet. "You have to go to Vermont." 2 days later, I was on a bus heading north, watching the city skyline recede. The journey felt surreal. I told my manager at the coffee shop I had a family emergency, which wasn't entirely a lie. As the landscape shifted from concrete and steel to rolling green hills and quaint small towns, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in months. The law office of Mr. Abernathy was on the main street of a picturesque town that looked like it had been pulled from a postcard. He was a kind, elderly man with a gentle demeanor who seemed to know all about my great-aunt. "Ilara was a remarkable woman," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "Very private, but incredibly astute. She followed your career, you know." I was floored. She did how? Oh, she was a quiet supporter of the arts and small artisans. She subscribed to several food and craft magazines. She had articles about your business, Artisan's Table, cut out and saved. She was very proud of you for striking out on your own, for building something authentic. She said you had her spirit. Tears welled in my eyes. A woman I barely knew, a relative my family had written off, had been cheering for me from afar while my own parents couldn't be bothered. Then Mr. Abernathy slid a folder across his desk. Now, to the estate. The house was a charming, rambling cottage on several acres of land, filled with her artwork and books. But it was the investment portfolio that left me breathless. Ilara, the eccentric artist, had been a shockingly savvy investor. Decades ago, she had taken her small share of the Vance family inheritance and invested it wisely in emerging tech companies and sustainable energy. She had lived simply, allowing the portfolio to grow, untouched, for over 40 years. The total value was staggering. It wasn't just enough to pay off my debts. It wasn't just enough to start a new business. It was a life-altering sum of money. It was generational wealth, managed with a wisdom and patience my father, for all his blustering about the market, could never have appreciated. Tucked inside the portfolio was a handwritten letter addressed to me. Her script was elegant and flowing. "My dearest Maya," it began. "If you are reading this, then I have gone on to my next adventure. I apologize for not being more present in your life. My relationship with your side of the family was complicated. Your grandfather was a good man, but his son, your father, always saw the world in dollar signs and prestige. I could not live in that world, so I made my own. I have followed your journey from a distance, and I see the same fire in you that I had in myself. The courage to create, to build something beautiful and real. That is a greater inheritance than any amount of money. But money, I have learned, can provide freedom. Freedom from those who would try to control you, and the freedom to build your dreams on your own terms. I suspect you may be at a crossroads as you read this. Know this: true failure is not falling down, it is staying down. Use this gift not for revenge, but for resilience. Build a life so full and authentic that their world of shallow victories becomes insignificant. Your name is not just a brand, it is your story. Make it a magnificent one. With all my love. Your Aunt Elara. I sat in that quiet law office, tears streaming down my face, clutching the letter. It was more than just a will, it was a validation, a passing of a torch. A voice from the past had reached out and given me not just a lifeline, but a new foundation. The money was a tool, but her words were the true inheritance. Freedom, resilience. The idea of revenge had been a simmering, bitter thing, but Alara's letter reframed it. This wasn't about getting even. It was about getting ahead. It was about proving her right, and in doing so, proving my family wrong on a scale they couldn't possibly comprehend. I walked out of that office not just with a fortune, but with a purpose. The game had changed, and I was about to write a new set of rules. The first order of business was to settle my past. I returned to the city with a sense of quiet determination that felt entirely new. With a fraction of Alara's inheritance, I paid off every single debt associated with Artisan's Table. I wrote checks to my former suppliers, landlords, and the bank, the crisp sound of the pen on paper a symphony of liberation. But the most important payments I made were to my former employees. I calculated the wages they would have earned for a full year and paid it to them, with a substantial bonus on top. I met with each of them in person. The shock on their faces quickly turned to tears of gratitude. "Maya, you didn't have to do this," Sarah, my baker, said, her voice thick with emotion. "The business failed. That wasn't on you." "It was my responsibility," I replied, "and I'm making it right." Leaving them with a secure future was the only way to truly close that painful chapter. It wasn't just about clearing my name financially, it was about clearing my conscience. With the past settled, I turned to the future. I had the capital to do anything I wanted, but Alara's words echoed in my mind: build something authentic. Relaunching Artisan's Table felt wrong. It was tied to a past of struggle and rejection. I needed something new, something that was entirely mine. With Chloe's help, I began to explore my options. Chloe, with her sharp financial mind, was invaluable. We spent weeks analyzing market trends, poring over investment opportunities, and brainstorming. "Your aunt was a genius, Maya," Chloe said one evening, looking over the detailed ledgers of Alara's portfolio. She invested in companies that had strong ethical foundations and long-term growth potential. She wasn't just playing the market, she was investing in a better future. It was while digging through the old paperwork from Alara's estate that I found it. Tucked away in a dusty box labeled Vance Family Archives was a thick, leather-bound ledger. It wasn't part of the official legal documents, but rather a collection of personal notes and records Alara had kept. Most of it was family history, but one section was filled with her meticulous notes on the early days of Vance Holdings, my grandfather's company, which my father now ran. My grandfather, it turned out, had a business partner in the very beginning, a man named Samuel Petrov. According to Alara's notes, Samuel was the architectural visionary, the creative genius, while my grandfather was the business-savvy negotiator. Together, they built the foundation of the company. But as the company grew, my grandfather, pushed by a young and ambitious Arthur, my father, made a series of aggressive moves to buy Samuel out. The official story I'd always been told was that Samuel Petrov had willingly sold his shares to pursue other interests. Alara's ledger told a different story. It was a hostile takeover, orchestrated by my father. He had leveraged a temporary financial hardship of Samuel's to force him to sell his shares for a fraction of their true value. Alara had written, "Arthur called it a masterstroke. I called it theft." He stole that man's dream and built his empire on a cracked foundation. The ledger contained copies of letters between Alara and Samuel, where he lamented the betrayal. He had lost everything, and the shame had forced him to move away and start over. But the most damning discovery was a note Alara had made about the original partnership agreement. It included a legacy clause, a provision stating that if the company ever went public or was sold, a significant percentage of the profits from the original properties they developed together was to be given to Samuel Petrov or his descendants. It was a clause my grandfather had insisted on to protect his friend. Alara speculated that my father had either forgotten about it or, more likely, buried it, assuming Samuel would never have the resources to challenge him. A cold realization washed over me. My father's empire, the source of his immense pride and the justification for his cold, ruthless worldview, was built on a lie. His first major success, the one that launched his career, was an act of brutal betrayal against a trusted partner. It was the exact same pattern of behavior he had shown me. When someone is down, you don't offer a hand, you take what's left. I showed the ledger to Chloe. Her eyes widened as she read. Maya, this is dynamite. If this legacy clause is legally binding, and if you can find this Samuel Petrov or his family, then my father's entire foundation could crack, I finished. A plan began to form in my mind, a strategy more intricate and far-reaching than simply starting a new company. This wasn't just about building my own success anymore. It was about correcting a historical injustice. It was about using the resources Alara had given me to expose the truth. My revenge would not be loud and emotional. It would be quiet, strategic, and devastatingly precise. It would be a business move. The first step was to find the Petrov family. It took weeks of work with a private investigator, but we finally found them. Samuel had passed away years ago, but his granddaughter, Anya Petrov, was alive and well. She was a brilliant but struggling architect, running a small, innovative firm that focused on sustainable, affordable housing, the very kind of ethical, forward-thinking work Alara would have admired. Her firm was on the brink of collapse, ironically for the same reason Artisan's Table had been, a lack of capital. I arranged a meeting with Anya, not revealing my full story at first. I simply introduced myself as an investor interested in her work. She was wary but passionate, her designs beautiful and revolutionary. After our second meeting, once I knew I could trust her, I laid everything on the table. I showed her Alara's ledger, the copies of the letters, and the notes about the legacy clause. She stared at the documents, her face a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a dawning, righteous anger. My grandfather never spoke of it, she whispered. He was always so sad when he talked about his first company. He said he lost his nerve. He never said it was stolen from him. Your grandfather was betrayed, I said gently. And my father built his career on that betrayal. I want to help you make it right. We made a pact. We would become partners. I would provide the capital to save her firm and bring her designs to life. Together, we would build a new kind of development company, one founded on the principles of integrity and sustainability that her grandfather had cherished. And we would also hire the best legal team money could buy to investigate the legacy clause and prepare a case against Vance Holdings. The ledger of lies had given me a roadmap. My father had taught me that business was about cutting losses and being ruthless. I was about to show him what happens when someone you've written off comes back to collect a debt you never thought you'd have to pay. The phoenix was about to rise, and it was going to be built on the very ground my father had stolen. With a clear purpose, I moved with a speed and efficiency that would have stunned my family. My partnership with Anya Petrov was the cornerstone of our new venture. We incorporated under a name that was a quiet tribute to both of our legacies, Petrovalara Development. It was a name that meant nothing to the outside world, but everything to us. It stood for integrity, vision, and the fusion of two family stories that had been forcibly separated by my father's greed. My role was strategy and finance, leveraging the fortune Alara had left me. Anya's role was design and execution. Her architectural vision was breathtaking. She didn't just design buildings, she designed communities. Her plans integrated green spaces, energy-efficient technologies, and shared amenities that fostered connection. It was the antithesis of my father's cold, imposing glass and steel towers that prioritized profit over people. Our first move was to acquire a large, neglected plot of land in an up-and-coming part of the city. It was a risky purchase that other developers had overlooked. My father, I knew, would have dismissed it as worthless, but Anya saw potential. She designed a mixed-use development with affordable housing units, community gardens, a small business incubator, and a central park. It was ambitious and people-centric. We called it the Commons. While Anya and her team brought the architectural plans to life, I assembled our A-team. I hired Chloe away from her corporate job, making her the CFO of Petra Valera. Her analytical prowess was exactly what we needed. I also brought on board the best legal team in the city, a firm known for its tenacity in corporate litigation. Their first task was to discreetly investigate the legacy clause from the Vance Holdings partnership agreement. They worked in the background, digging through archives and legal precedents, building our case brick by brick. The most satisfying part of this new chapter was finding my old team from Artisan's Table. I offered Sarah, my baker, the lead position in managing the commercial spaces for the Commons, helping to curate a selection of local, independent businesses to fill our storefronts. Her eye for quality and her understanding of the struggles of small business owners were invaluable. I hired David, my former driver, to manage logistics for our construction sites while he finished his degree, which our company now paid for. Their loyalty was something I would never take for granted, and bringing them into this new success felt like a fundamental part of the victory. Our strategy, which Chloe and I dubbed the Phoenix strategy, was twofold. First, we had to yield our own empire, a successful, respected, and profitable company that could stand on its own merits. This was crucial. We couldn't just be the firm with a legal claim, we had to be a genuine force in the industry. This would give us the leverage and public standing we needed when the time came for the confrontation. Second, we had to meticulously prepare our legal challenge. It had to be airtight, undeniable, and timed for maximum impact. For over a year, we worked tirelessly, staying completely under the radar. The real estate world is surprisingly small, but because our first project was in a neighborhood my father's company ignored, we went unnoticed. The Commons began to take shape, rising from the forgotten patch of earth. We secured pre-leases for all our commercial spaces with exciting local businesses, and a waitlist for the residential units grew by the day. We were creating a buzz not through flashy marketing, but through genuine community engagement and a mission that people believed in. During this time, I had zero contact with my family. I was still invisible to them. I imagined they assumed I was working some menial job, a cautionary tale they told their friends about the dangers of artistic temperaments. Let them think that. Their ignorance was my shield. The legal team finally had a breakthrough. They found the original, signed partnership agreement buried deep in the city's archives. The legacy clause was there, exactly as Alara had described it, and it was ironclad. Anya Petrov, as Samuel's legal heir, had a right to a significant percentage of the net value of several of Vance Holdings' oldest and most profitable properties that formed the very bedrock of my father's wealth. The law was on our side. With our first project, the Commons, nearing completion and our legal case ready, it was time to plan the final stage. A quiet legal settlement was not what I wanted. My father had publicly humiliated me and privately destroyed Anya's grandfather. The resolution had to be just as public. And then, the perfect opportunity presented itself. My mother, Isabel, was chairing the annual Metropolitan Legacy Gala, the city's most prestigious charity event. It was the pinnacle of the social calendar, an evening where the city's elite gathered to flaunt their wealth under the guise of philanthropy. My father's company, Vance Holdings, was the lead sponsor. He was set to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award for his contributions to the city's skyline. The irony was sickeningly perfect. He was going to be celebrated for a legacy built on a foundation of lies. And it was there, in a room full of his peers, colleagues, and the press, that the truth would finally come to light. Chloe, Anya, and I gathered in our new office, the city lights twinkling outside our window. We looked at the invitation to the gala that had been delivered to Petrovalera Development, a company now recognized as a significant new player in the market. "Are you ready for this, Maya?" Anya asked, her expression a mix of nervousness and fierce resolve. I looked at the invitation, at my father's name printed in elegant script. I thought of the condescending look on his face in his study, the triumphant smirk on my brother's, and the casual cruelty of that family-first hashtag. I thought of Alera's letter, of her belief in me. "He taught me that business is about cutting your losses," I said, a cold calm settling over me. "He's about to learn a very public lesson about paying your debts." Our Phoenix strategy was complete. It was time to watch the old world burn to make way for the new. The night of the Metropolitan Legacy Gala arrived with an electric tension in the air. The grand ballroom of the city's most historic hotel was dripping with crystals and overflowing with the titans of industry, politics, and culture. It was my mother's masterpiece of social engineering, a room designed to radiate power and prestige. And tonight, its guest of honor was my father, Arthur Vance. I did not have a ticket. My plan did not involve making polite conversation over canapés. Anya and Chloe were my eyes and ears inside, having accepted our company's invitation. They looked stunning, blending in seamlessly with the elite crowd, texting me updates from their table. My role was different. I was the ghost at the feast, the uninvited guest waiting for the perfect moment to make my entrance. I sat with our lead counsel, a sharp, unshakable woman named Ms. Davenport, in a suite we had booked in the same hotel. On the table between us was a single, sleek briefcase. It contained a finalized, court-filed injunction and a comprehensive lawsuit against Vance Holdings, citing the legacy clause and demanding immediate restitution for Anya Petrov. It detailed, with irrefutable evidence, the story of Samuel Petrov's forced buyout and the decades of profits that were rightfully his family's. Everything was ready. All we needed was the signal. Chloe's texts came in a steady stream. "Your mother is in her element, holding court like a queen." "Liam just schmoozed the mayor. He looks like he's practicing to be his father." "They're starting the tribute video for Arthur now." This was it. On a large screen at the front of the ballroom, a professionally produced video began to play. It was a glossy ode to my father's career, featuring soaring shots of his buildings set to dramatic, inspiring music. Friends and colleagues appeared on screen, offering fawning praise for his vision, tenacity, and unwavering integrity. The hypocrisy was so thick I could feel it through the floor. As the video concluded, my mother walked to the podium, her sequined gown shimmering under the spotlights. Her voice, smooth and practiced, filled the room. "And now, it is my distinct honor to present the Lifetime Achievement Award to a man who has not only shaped our city's skyline, but has been the rock of our family. My husband, Arthur Vance." The room erupted in applause. My father, beaming with pride, walked onto the stage, kissed my mother, and stepped up to the microphone. He held the crystal award in his hand, a symbol of his supposed legacy. "Thank you, Isabel," he began, his voice resonant with false humility. "Thank you to the board and to all of you who have supported Vance Holdings over the years. When I started, I had a simple philosophy: build with strength, integrity, and an eye toward the future. It's a philosophy I am proud to be passing on to my son, Liam." That was my cue. I stood up, smoothed down my simple but elegant black dress, and walked out of the hotel suite with Ms. Davenport. We didn't take the main elevator. We took the staff elevator down to the ballroom level and walked purposefully towards the main entrance. A security guard tried to stop us. "Ma'am, this is a private event." Ms. Davenport presented her credentials. "I am legal counsel, here to serve a notice to Mr. Arthur Vance. You can either let us through, or you can be named in a suit for obstruction." The guard, flustered, stepped aside. We walked into the back of the ballroom just as my father was wrapping up his speech. The applause began to swell again, but it faltered as a murmur spread through the room. People were turning their heads, noticing the two women standing at the entrance with an air of cold, hard purpose. I saw my mother's eyes find me first. Her smile froze, a flicker of confusion and annoyance crossing her face. Then Liam saw me, his expression hardening. Finally, my father, blinded by the stage lights, squinted, trying to make out the source of the commotion. As the applause died down, a tense silence fell over the room, and in that silence I began to walk. I walked down the central aisle, my heels clicking on the marble floor. It was the longest walk of my life. Every eye in the room was on me. I wasn't the failed daughter anymore. I was an enigma, an interruption to their perfect evening. I stopped at the foot of the stage, looking directly up at my father. His face had transformed from pride to disbelief, then to a dark, simmering rage. "Maya," he said, his voice a low growl into the microphone, the sound echoing through the silent ballroom. "What is the meaning of this?" "I believe this belongs to you, Father," I said, my voice clear and steady, though my heart was hammering. Ms. Davenport stepped forward and handed the briefcase up to a stage assistant, who, looking utterly bewildered, placed it on the podium next to my father's award. "That is a court-filed injunction against Vance Holdings on behalf of the estate of Samuel Petrov," my voice rang out, amplified by the still live microphone. "I believe you remember him, your first partner, the man whose legacy you stole to build your own." A collective gasp went through the room. My father's face went pale. My mother looked like she might faint. Liam took a step forward, his face contorted with fury. "This is a private family matter," he snarled from the stage. It stopped being a family matter when my father's business ethics became the subject of a federal lawsuit. Ms. Davenport stated calmly, but loudly from my side, "Copies of which are being delivered to every major news outlet in the city as we speak." I turned my gaze from my father to the audience. "Tonight, you are honoring a man for his legacy," I said, my voice resonating with a strength I never knew I possessed. "I am here to ensure you know the true story of that legacy. It is a legacy that includes forcing a partner out of his dream, burying the truth for 40 years, and profiting from that lie every single day. The woman who made our legal action possible is here tonight. Anya Petrov, the granddaughter of Samuel Petrov and my business partner." On cue, at her table, Anya stood up. She was elegant, composed, and the living embodiment of the truth. All eyes swiveled from me to her. The story was no longer Jay. Ust my word, it had a face and a history. My father stood on the stage, speechless, clutching his award. The symbol of his life's work now looked like a cheap trinket. The room was a sea of shocked faces, whispering and pulling out their phones. The perfect image he and my mother had spent a lifetime curating had been shattered in less than 5 minutes. I looked up at him one last time. There was no triumph in my heart, only a quiet, resolute sense of justice. I hadn't screamed or cried. I had simply presented the facts. I had used his own language, the language of business, law, and consequences. Without another word, I turned and walked back down the aisle, Ms. Davenport at my side. I didn't look back. I could feel the weight of hundreds of pairs of eyes on me, and the heavier weight of my family's world collapsing behind me. The uninvited guest had delivered her message. The gala was over. The aftermath of the gala was a media firestorm. As Ms. Davenport had promised, the story broke that very night. "Vance Holdings sued for fraud," screamed the headlines. "Philanthropist of the Year accused of betrayal." The narrative my family had so carefully controlled was ripped to shreds and replaced with the sordid details from our lawsuit. Ilara's ledger, the letters, the legacy clause, it all came out. The press, smelling blood in the water, was relentless. My father, the titan of industry, was suddenly portrayed as a corporate predator. My mother, the queen of society, went into seclusion, her carefully constructed world of appearances crumbling around her. The legal battle was shorter than anyone expected. Faced with the mountain of irrefutable evidence and the crushing weight of public opinion, Vance Holdings had no choice but to settle. The settlement was massive. It not only restored to Anya the full, inflation-adjusted value of her grandfather's stolen shares, but also gave her a significant stake in the company's future profits. It was a victory so complete, so decisive, that it fundamentally altered the power balance of the Vance empire. Liam, who was being groomed to take over, was suddenly a vice president in a company where his family was no longer the sole authority. The board of directors, spooked by the scandal, began to assert its independence. My father's iron grip had been broken. Anya used her new capital and influence to transform her grandfather's legacy. She established the Samuel Petrov Foundation for Ethical Architecture, funding scholarships and grants for young designers committed to sustainable and community-focused projects. She didn't destroy Vance Holdings. She began the slow, arduous process of changing it from within, a far more profound and lasting victory. As for me, I never spoke to my parents or Liam again. There were a few desperate, angry voicemails in the days following the gala, but I never returned them. What was there to say? I had made my statement. Their rejection of me had been a business decision, and my response had been the same. They had written me off as a liability. I had simply become an asset they couldn't control. My focus was on Petrovalera development. The Commons was a resounding success, winning awards not just for its design, but for its community impact. It became a model for urban development, and our company was flooded with offers for new projects. We grew, but we grew carefully, always adhering to the principles of integrity and authenticity that Alera and Samuel had embodied. We built things that mattered. About a year after the settlement, Chloe, Anya, and I stood on the rooftop garden of our newly completed second project. We were celebrating the company's 2-year anniversary. It was a crisp autumn evening, and the city's skyline stretched out before us. Among the glittering towers, I could see the familiar silhouettes of the buildings my father had built. They no longer looked intimidating. They just looked small. "You know," Anya said, clinking her glass against mine, "my grandfather would have loved this. He would have loved what we're building." "So would my great-aunt," I replied, a genuine smile on my face. "I think they would have been great friends." My life was unrecognizable from the desperate, broken one I had been living just a few years earlier. I was no longer Maya Vance, the failed daughter of Arthur Vance. I was Maya, the co-founder of Petrovalera. I had built a new life, a new career, and a new family. My family wasn't one of blood and obligation, but one of choice, loyalty, and shared values. It was Chloe, Anya, and the team we had built together. It was the communities we were creating. I occasionally saw articles about my parents. They maintained a much lower profile. The galas and the awards had stopped. They were still wealthy, of course, but their social currency, the thing they valued above all else, was gone. They had become a cautionary tale of hubris. Looking out at the city, I finally understood the last line of Alera's letter. "Your name is not just a brand, it is your story. Make it a magnificent one." I had spent so much of my life living in the shadow of the Vance name, first trying to live up to it, then being crushed by it. The lawsuit wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about reclaiming my name, not as an inheritance from my father, but as my own story to write. I had taken the ashes of my failure and the legacy of a forgotten aunt and built an empire founded on everything my father stood against. He had closed a door on me, thinking he was locking me in a room of failure. He never imagined I would use the time in the dark to find a key, walk out, and build a whole new house right next to his, one with a foundation that was strong, true, and entirely my own.